So let's talk about what is HTML, CSS, and how do these two things work together. So we've kind of really briefly gone over this in previous videos, but to clarify, all of the internet, right, all of the internet is just a series of servers or computers, basically, that we are accessing. Here's my little bad drawing of a computer. Okay. So we are accessing a server somewhere, and that server has a little folder in it, and that folder is probably something called public HTML. And within that folder, you might have a bunch of different files, right? So there's all these different files, and we might have a file called index.html. You might have one called, if you have an about page, it might be like about.html. You might have a folder of images. You might have a folder of videos if it's a video website. And you might have a folder called CSS. And within that folder, I'm just going to kind of draw this as a little folder, you might have a file called style.css. Now, one important thing to note is that all of these HTML files or these CSS files, these are all just text, okay? All of it is just text that's being rendered by the browser in a unique way, okay? So whenever you visit a website, so whenever you go to, I'll just use my website as an example, so CameronBuckley.org. Whenever you go to my website, what's really happening is it's sending that request, right? We talked about this the first week, and requesting for some data from my website. And in particular, it's requesting for index.html. And index.html is just the default. It's what shows whenever you go to a website. So, for example, and on my website, we're actually loading /index.html. So in reality, this is exactly the same as just my username, right? And there's a bunch of different things in here. There's different pages. Let's go to like this. This is my CV. Whenever I highlight over this, you see in the bottom left-hand corner, it says CameronBuckley.org/files/cv.pdf. So really, it's just like your computer. We're accessing a folder called files, and within that, we're accessing a file called cv.pdf. Okay, simple enough. So whenever we actually get into writing HTML, it's important to understand what the purpose of HTML and CSS is. There's also kind of a third language that's very commonly used called JavaScript. We're not going to get into that in this class, but all you need to know is that JavaScript adds interactivity. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. You might remember HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Hypertext is just a fancy word for basically, special text files that we're rendering in a special way. So just like I described before, HTML is a special type of text file. We're rendering it in a special way with HTTP. So HTML is Hypertext Markup Language. Markup language just means it's a language used to identify certain things. So HTML identifies structure. So I'll do IDs structure. So basically, what we're doing with HTML is we're kind of tagging different parts of the page and saying, okay, here, this is a paragraph, this is a title, this is a heading, this is an image. All we're doing is IDing or identifying certain parts of our page's structure. HTML doesn't really do any styling. All right, styling means how does the page actually look? So what font are we using? How large is the font? What color is it? What color is the background? How big is the image? That's not what HTML does. That is what CSS does. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. And really what that means is CSS just styles our HTML. So whenever we do something in CSS, we're changing how the HTML visually appears. Let's write out a little example. I'm going to show you what each of these looks like. So HTML looks like this. It has a little less than or greater than sign. And then it might have a letter or a word. And this is like the start of a tag. So this is the paragraph tag, and it's saying the text in here. So let's say I have a bunch of text here is a paragraph. And then we tell it to end by doing the same tag, but with a slash. Right? So there's a slash right here. So that's saying this is the start of a paragraph, this is the end of a paragraph. Okay? CSS is a separate document, or it can also be done within the HTML document, but in this class I'm going to teach you as a separate document. CSS looks like this. P, and then I have a little curly brace. I'm going to run out of space here, but it doesn't really matter, you'll get the idea. So I have an ending curly brace here, and I might say color red. So what this is saying is, so again, this is HTML, and this down here is CSS. So really what I'm saying here is, this is a paragraph, and then on this one I'm saying, make that paragraph's text color means font color, red. Okay? It's as simple as that. So I'm selecting any of these paragraph tags, and I'm telling them, make your color red. I could do something like font, sorry, my tablet's not collaborating with me today, font size, and I could say something like 28, and that just says make it 28-point font. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it just IDs the structure of the page. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, and that styles the page. Both of those are uploaded to your server, so eventually whenever we actually get to uploading these to server, these all get placed on the server, and you can actually, update them and view them and see how they look on the internet. Let's go back to my website for just a second. So right here I have my index.html file, and in fact if I right-click and say page source, I can actually see the HTML code of my page. So this is HTML, right? This is something called a div, and we have a slash div, so that's the end of that div. Now as far as my style sheet goes, I have a bunch of style sheets, but this is what my style sheet looks like. So in this case, I'm saying my logo needs to have a margin of 5%, auto, text align center, all these other things, right? This seems really overwhelming and probably super complicated right now, but once you get into it, it'll make a lot of sense and you'll be able to read these across the internet.